Well, Gotabaya Rajapaksa has escaped from his country, leaving his citizens in lurch, pushing them onto the streets. And of course, he has not officially handed over his resignation, though he claimed that he would be handing over his resignation yesterday, later in the evening, but that clearly hasn't happened. But what we do know at the moment is Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, during his cabinet meeting, he made it very clear, saying that an all-party government must be formed and also a new Prime Minister must be elected. Now, if Ranil Wickremesinghe, as the Prime Minister, current Prime Minister, goes on to say that a new Prime Minister must be elected, now it is an understanding at the point that he will remain as an acting president, because as far as the all parties leaders meet is concerned, which happened yesterday, we understand all the parties have arrived, party leaders have arrived at a consensus and have informed Speaker that he must be the acting president. So this, in terms of the political turmoil that we are looking at, yes, of course, it's in limbo because there is no clarity like who really is the head. On one hand, you have the all party leaders objecting to the fact that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe is the acting president. On the other hand, people's anger is seen on the streets, spilling onto the streets. On the other hand, you're also still looking at where people demanding that they also want Ranil Wickremesinghe to go back home. In fact, if I could go across to one concerned citizen who's joining us here live on NDTV, we have seen how your president has escaped the country. You all are out on the streets. For how long have you been here on the, especially the petrol queue?
Yeah, hi, kind morning to everyone. Yeah, this is our fourth day actually. This is very difficult period to us, and we are we are in the pharmaceutical field people. We are working for the Mankind Pharma, that is the Indian company, very good company. They still paying our salary and everything, but we are...
you don't have fuel actually to carry out the business. What do you have to talk about that your president has forced you all out to the streets and he's escaped?
Yeah, we believe he is now in abroad. But still we don't have trust any politician in this situation.
Even Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Yeah, every politicians they say lie every day. So that is now we don't have any ideas about the politician. So that's the problem in this situation.
Well, in fact, one citizen telling us that he has enough hardships to face and, of course, has not really any time to focus on in terms of the political turmoil that's been happening. He also says any politician at this time, at this juncture, in terms of whether it is Ranil Wickremesinghe, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, or the dynasty politics that's been going on for years together, that is not something really what Sri Lanka wants. Of course, there is a question that still is answered. If Gotabaya goes or even Ranil Wickremesinghe goes, will the economic, in terms of the turmoil, will it go away? Will they get back on track immediately? Well, that is not clear because at the moment we understand the country is in limbo. On the other hand, what really is at stake is also the IMF program and the food program as well. So definitely we continue to see this long fuel queues for, like one of the citizens did point out, he's been in this line for 4 days. So the country has absolutely no fuel, no medicines at all, no food. No, that is how the country's situation has come to. On the other hand, there is power struggle that's been happening in Sri Lanka.
Sreeja, of course, it comes to the people not having their basic essentials, but also if you could tell us what's the status of the protests today? The Prime Minister refusing to resign, are the protests expected to grow or are they expected to tone down?
Well, it's definitely not going to tone down because it's going to cross 100 days now. And these protesters have been out in the streets, 100 days straight out in the streets. They have, converted this demonstration site right next to the old parliament, and they've converted it to be called as Gota Go Gama. It also talks about how Gota should leave his post. But now we see chorus is also growing louder for Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe's resignation. So the protests have not simmered a bit. It is just continuing. But remember, it is important to remember that on the 9th of July, what we witnessed, because of course they called it an end game. The protesters called it an end game, the victory that they wanted to see. And because they gave some time for Mr. Gotabaya to leave his post and Ranil Wickremesinghe to resign, when that did not happen, the protesters took over the presidential palace, the temple trees, and then, of course, the old parliament. So yesterday, what we saw is, of course, the minute the protesters heard that Ranil Wickremesinghe is going to be made the acting president, the first thing that they did was, of course, we saw the standoff between the police and the people, but eventually they succeeded in breaking open the gates and then reaching the heavily guarded Prime Minister's office. And now that's also become a tourist spot. So what next is something that's still not clear at the moment, because on the other hand, you have still, the speaker to decide, or the all-party leaders to decide who is going to be the acting president. You have also where Prime Minister saying that he's going to be the acting president and a new Prime Minister will have to be elected. And on the other hand, on the other side, you have the protesters continuing the protests, which they say they will not stop, they will not vacate from these political structures until Ranil Wickremesinghe steps down.